I watched my sister drop 3 pills into my champagne at my retirement party. I didn't stop her. I switched our glasses and waited. Not because I'm cruel, because I'd spent 58 years being underestimated by my family, and I was done explaining myself. Sometimes you have to let people poison themselves. The Naval Station Norfolk Officers Club had that particular September light coming through the western windows, the kind that turns everything amber and makes even government furniture look expensive. 6:15 in the evening, 180 guests milling between the bar and the buffet tables, their voices creating that specific sound of people who work in classified spaces trying to make small talk in public. Navy brass and dress whites, local politicians practicing their concerned citizen faces, defense contractors checking phones, family members looking uncomfortable in formal wear they'd bought specifically for this occasion. I stood near the bar with my back to the mirrored panel, ostensibly fixing my collar, but actually watching the reflection. 30 years in naval intelligence teaches you that mirrors are better witnesses than people. People lie about what they saw. Mirrors just show you what happened. Jennifer arrived 17 minutes late, which meant she'd timed it for maximum entrance value. Carolina Herrera Navy suit, the one that retailed for $4,000, which was ironic considering she'd filed for bankruptcy protection 8 months ago. Hermes clutch in that specific shade of red that screams, "Look at me." Hair professionally blown out, makeup camera ready. My sister had always understood that appearances were investments, even when she couldn't afford the principal. She scanned the room the way people do when they're looking for someone specific, while pretending to look for everyone general. Her gaze skipped past me twice before landing, and I saw the micro-expression she couldn't quite control. Not happiness, not even the performance of sisterly affection she usually managed at family events. Just calculation, cold and clean as surgical steel. In 47 minutes, Jennifer would collapse on this floor. In 6 hours, paramedics would pump her stomach at Centera Norfolk General. But that wasn't justice. Justice would arrive 3 days later when she discovered I owned this building, the apartment complex where she rented, and 60% of the company where her husband worked. Right now, though, she was walking toward me with a smile, preparing to celebrate what she thought would be my last conscious hours on Earth. The thing about attempted murder is that it requires a fundamental misunderstanding of your target. Jennifer had spent 62 years knowing me as her younger sister, the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who joined the military because she couldn't figure out what else to do with a life that demanded structure. She knew Commander Catherine Morrison, 30-year Navy intelligence officer, modest salary, base housing, 10-year-old Honda Accord. She had absolutely no idea who Kate Morrison actually was. That ignorance was about to cost her everything. 26 years earlier, I'd been a junior officer making $42,000 a year, living in a studio apartment in Virginia Beach that smelled like mildew and someone else's cooking. The Navy taught me how to read encrypted communications and identify patterns in noise. Real estate taught me how to turn those skills into wealth. The duplex had been listed as a foreclosure, which meant the bank wanted it gone and didn't care about getting full value. $67,000 for 2 units in a neighborhood that was either going to gentrify or collapse. And I'd spent 3 months analyzing crime statistics, school ratings, infrastructure investment, and Navy retention rates before deciding which outcome was more likely. Jennifer had driven past it once during that research phase, wrinkling her nose at the peeling paint and overgrown yard. "You're wasting money on that dump!" Her voice had carried that particular mix of concern and contempt that she'd perfected over the years. "You should enjoy life, travel, buy nice things, stop being so scared of everything." I'd smiled and nodded and signed the mortgage papers the next day. The dump generated $1,600 a month in rental income once I'd replaced the roof and updated the electrical. By the time I deployed to Bahrain the following year, that duplex had appreciated to $92,000. I sold it for a profit that most junior officers made in salary, rolled the money into 2 more properties, and learned the first rule of building wealth in a family that measured success by noise: shut up and compound. Jennifer, meanwhile, had burned through 3 different business ideas and was explaining to anyone who'd listen why the catering company, the boutique fitness studio, and the life coaching practice had all failed due to circumstances beyond her control. bad partners, unfair competition, markets that weren't ready for her vision. She never seemed to notice that the circumstances were remarkably similar across all three ventures, or that the common denominator was her. By 2001, I owned 4 rental properties worth a combined $890,000. The post 9/11 security surge meant military families needed housing and weren't price sensitive. I sold 2 properties at the peak, paid cash for a small strip mall that was zoned commercial but priced residential, and watched the anchor tenant's lease renew at triple the original rate. Jennifer was struggling with her second divorce and a failed catering business when she asked me for $15,000 to keep her from losing her car. I don't have that much in savings. The lie came easily because it was technically true. I didn't have it in savings. I had it in rental income that deposited automatically every month, in appreciation that accrued whether I thought about it or not, in equity that I could access with a phone call. But saying that would have meant explaining, and explaining would have meant becoming an ATM instead of a sister. "You're so stingy." Jennifer's voice had gotten that wounded edge, the one that suggested I was committing violence by having boundaries. Family should help family. I'd written her a check for $5,000 instead, called it a gift, and listened to my mother explain later that I should have been more generous. Jennifer needed support. Jennifer was going through a hard time. Why couldn't I understand that not everyone was as fortunate as me? The fortunate part was particularly rich. Fortune, my mother seemed to believe, was something that happened to you rather than something you built through discipline and strategic patience. But correcting her would have required revealing the portfolio, and revealing the portfolio would have meant losing the invisibility that let me operate freely. The 2008 financial crisis was the best thing that ever happened to my net worth. While everyone else panicked, I borrowed against properties that had doubled in value and bought 7 foreclosures for an average of $170,000 each. 3 years later, those properties were worth $6.8 million combined. By 2012, my net worth had crossed into 8 figures, and I was still driving a Honda and shopping at Costco and letting my family believe I was just a career military officer grinding toward a pension. Jennifer's marriage was failing by then. Her credit destroyed by a series of business ventures that she'd explained away as bad timing. She needed me to co-sign a $50,000 loan for something she called a fresh start. I can't risk my credit. That was true. I couldn't risk it because I had another commercial property purchase pending, and the bank wouldn't approve the loan if I was carrying someone else's liability. But the truth underneath the truth was that I wasn't going to subsidize another cycle of Jennifer's pattern. Big dreams, poor execution, blame redistribution, request for rescue. Jennifer had told our parents I was selfish, successful military career, and too stingy to help her own sister. My father had suggested gently that maybe I could afford to be more generous now that I was moving up in rank. My mother had reminded me that family was forever, and money was just money. Neither of them knew I was worth $4 million by then. Neither of them would have believed it if I'd told them. 2019 was the year the Navy privatized the Officers Club building, and I bought it through an LLC for $9.8 million. The same month, I acquired the apartment complex where Jennifer had been renting for 3 years, paying $2,800 a month to a landlord she'd never met. The acquisition cost $7.2 million, financed at 3.1% because my credit score was perfect, and my debt-to-income ratio was a bank's fantasy. Jennifer had no idea her rent checks were depositing into an account I controlled. She complained regularly about her landlord being unresponsive to maintenance requests, which was fair, because I deliberately kept management at arm's length and let the property manager handle everything. The property manager's job was to maintain profitability, not win popularity contests. Jennifer's hot water heater got replaced when it broke, but her requests for granite countertops got filed under tenant wants are not landlord obligations. My portfolio by then had crossed $38 million. The passive income was running $180,000 a month. I could have retired from the Navy years earlier, lived anywhere, done anything. Instead, I stayed in base housing and kept driving the Honda and let everyone believe I was just grinding out the last few years before pension eligibility. The invisibility wasn't about deception, it was about protection. The moment my family knew I had money, I'd stop being Kate and start being a resource. Every crisis would become my responsibility. Every failure would become my fault for not preventing it. Every success would be diminished to luck or privilege rather than the result of 25 years of disciplined decision-making. So I stayed quiet. I stayed small. I let them underestimate me. Jennifer was moving through the crowd now, working the room the way she always did, all charm and performance. She stopped to talk with Admiral Richardson, laughing at something he said, touching his arm in that way she had of making every interaction feel intimate. She complimented Captain Morrison's wife on her dress, asked Lieutenant Commander Torres about his daughter's college plans, and made it look effortless. Social intelligence had always been Jennifer's strength. She could read a room, mirror energy, make people feel seen. It just never translated into sustainable business success because charm doesn't pay bills and personality doesn't replace competence. She reached the bar and ordered something complicated, the kind of drink that requires the bartender to perform. While he was mixing, she leaned in close, saying something I couldn't hear but could read in the bartender's body language. He nodded, laughed, grabbed a different bottle. Jennifer glanced around the room, checking sightlines, calculating who could see what. I turned slightly, adjusting my position so the mirror caught a better angle. Jennifer's hand moved to her clutch. Casual. Practiced. She pulled out what looked like a small prescription bottle, the kind that fits in a palm. Her fingers worked the cap with the ease of someone who'd rehearsed this movement. 3 pills dropped into her hand. She glanced at the bartender, who was still focused on the cocktail shaker. She glanced at the crowd behind her, confirming no one was watching. Then her hand moved over my champagne glass, the one sitting at the bar corner where I'd left it 3 minutes earlier. Her wrist tilted. The pills dropped with barely a sound. She shifted her weight, used her body to block sightlines, and stirred the glass once with the small straw she'd taken from the bartender's station. The whole thing took maybe 6 seconds. Smooth, efficient, utterly damning. I didn't gasp, didn't move, didn't react in any way that would alert her or anyone else. Intelligence training kicks in at moments like this, overriding the emotional response with tactical assessment. Jennifer had just committed attempted murder in front of me, and she had no idea I'd watched every second. She dropped the empty bottle back into her clutch, accepted her complicated cocktail from the bartender, and turned to scan the room again. Her gaze passed over me without recognition, just another person in the crowd. She walked toward a group of civilian guests, already resetting her face into party-appropriate warmth. I waited 30 seconds, long enough for her to get clear, not long enough for anyone else to approach the bar. Then I moved. The switch was simple. Same glass, same bubbles, same gold rim. I picked up the poisoned champagne with my right hand, set it down where Jennifer's cocktail spot had been. Picked up the untouched backup glass the bartender had poured for general circulation, placed it where mine had been. 2 movements, casual, the kind of thing people do at bars all the time. The bartender didn't notice. The couple 3 feet away didn't notice. Jennifer across the room didn't notice. I lifted the clean glass and took a small sip, watched Jennifer in the mirror. She was laughing at something Congressman Whitmore said, her whole body language radiating confidence. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out, opened the camera app, and set it to record video. Angled it carefully so the screen was black, but the lens had a clear view of the bar area. Pretended to scroll through messages, while the phone captured Jennifer returning to the bar, picking up what she thought was her cocktail, carrying it away. Evidence first, reaction never. James found me near the window overlooking Chesapeake Bay. He'd been making conversation with some of my former colleagues, probably hearing stories about missions I'd never be able to confirm or deny. His hand found mine, gentle pressure that asked a question without words. "You okay?" "I'm good." The lie was easier than the truth. How do you tell your partner that you just watched your sister try to kill you, and your primary emotion isn't fear or anger, but a kind of resigned confirmation? Jennifer had been building towards something like this for years. I just hadn't known the exact shape it would take. James squeezed once, trusting me in the way that 5 years together had taught him. He didn't push, didn't hover, just stood beside me, present but not invasive, while I processed what came next. Admiral Richardson was moving toward the podium, which meant speeches were starting. The room would settle, attention would focus, and Jennifer would make her move. Not the poisoning. That was already done. The performance. The moment where she'd toast my success while internally calculating how long until the pills took effect. I checked the time. 6:34. Ambien typically took 30 to 45 minutes to reach peak concentration, depending on dosage and individual metabolism. Xanax was faster, 15 to 20 minutes. If Jennifer had mixed them, and the Google search history that Detective Warren would find 3 days from now suggested she had, the effects would hit somewhere between 6:55 and 7:15, which meant I had about 20 minutes before my sister collapsed from self-administered poisoning, and the real performance would begin. Admiral Richardson's voice cut through the crowd noise, calling everyone to attention. People migrated toward chairs, holding drinks, settling into that particular military event posture of respectful attention. I took a seat in the second row, James beside me. Jennifer sat 3 rows back, on the aisle, positioning herself for visibility. The Admiral's speech was generous in the way that retirement speeches always are, highlighting achievements without getting into classified specifics. 30 years of service, multiple deployments, commendations that couldn't be named but had made a difference. The kind of career that looks linear from the outside but felt like constant improvisation from the inside. Commander Morrison represents the best of what naval intelligence should be. Richardson's voice carried that formal warmth that flag officers develop over decades, precise in analysis, unshakable under pressure. And as she moves into retirement, I have no doubt she'll continue to serve in ways we can't predict, but will certainly appreciate. The audience applauded. I smiled and nodded, playing the part of grateful retiree. Jennifer's face in my peripheral vision was a study in controlled resentment. She clapped, but her hands didn't make noise. Her smile was tight. They called me up for the plaque presentation, the symbolic passing of responsibility, the photo opportunity that would end up on the Navy's website and probably my mother's Facebook page. I stood, shook hands, accepted the framed certificate that represented 3 decades of service reduced to bureaucratic acknowledgement, said thank you, meant it, mostly. Then it was my turn to speak, and I kept it brief. Brevity was kindness at events like this, where everyone was waiting for the open bar to transition from polite to productive. I'm grateful for this career. The words came easily because they were true. It taught me patience, observation, and timing. All useful skills. I let my gaze sweep the room, landing briefly on Jennifer before moving on. She shifted in her seat, possibly uncomfortable with the eye contact, possibly already feeling the first whisper of sedation in her bloodstream. The applause was warm. I stepped down, returned to my seat, watched Jennifer stand up, smooth her expensive suit, and move toward the front with the confidence of someone who believed she was about to win. She didn't have a microphone, which meant her voice had to project, which meant everyone would hear every word. She raised her glass, the one she'd picked up from the bar 20 minutes ago, the one that contained approximately 25 Ambien tablets crushed and dissolved, plus an unknown quantity of Xanax, and smiled at the room. To my baby sister Kate, her voice had that particular artificial warmth that family members use when performing affection for public consumption. You've always been the responsible one, the one who followed rules, the one who settled for enough instead of reaching for more. The pause was calculated, long enough for the subtext to land. I'd settled. I'd chosen safety over ambition. I'd been content with a military salary and a pension instead of taking risks, building businesses, chasing dreams the way Jennifer had. I hope retirement treats you well. Jennifer's smile was sharp now, all teeth and no warmth. You've earned exactly what you put in. She lifted the glass higher, tilted it toward her lips, and drank. Not a sip. A full swallow, theatrical and triumphant. The champagne went down, and with it, every pill she'd intended for me. I raised my clean glass, nodded once, didn't drink. Jennifer's expression flickered for half a second. Confusion, maybe, that I wasn't matching her performance, then reset to sisterly warmth. She walked back to her seat, and the room exhaled into casual conversation. James leaned close. That was pointed. She's always been pointed. I kept my voice low, just usually more subtle. Should I be worried? About Jennifer? I watched my sister settle back into her chair, chatting with the woman beside her. Not anymore. The buffet line opened. People migrated toward food, that universal event behavior that crosses all cultures and contexts. shrimp cocktail, carved beef, salads trying to pass as vegetables when they were mostly mayonnaise. I filled a plate without appetite, eating because not eating would draw attention, and attention would complicate what came next. 6:52. Jennifer was still vertical, still talking, still performing normalcy, but I could see the changes starting. The way her hand went to the table edge, fingers spreading for support, the slight pause between sentences, as if she was having to work harder to find words, the blink rate increasing. James saw it too. Is she okay? Remains to be seen. I took another bite of food I couldn't taste. 6:57. Jennifer stood up abruptly, saying something to her table mate. Her gait was careful, deliberate, the walk of someone trying not to look unsteady. She headed toward the bathroom, moving past clusters of conversation. I counted to 30, then followed. The women's restroom was decorated in that particular government issue style. Functional tile, commercial-grade fixtures, everything chosen for durability rather than aesthetic. 2 stalls, 1 occupied. I heard retching, violent and unmistakable. Jennifer? The retching continued. I pushed open the stall door. She hadn't locked it, which suggested her fine motor control was already compromised. She was on her knees, expensive suit ruined, hair hanging in strands around her face, vomit in the toilet and on the floor, her whole body shaking. I need help. Her voice was thick, slurred. Something's wrong. Kate, something's really wrong. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, gave them the address, the situation, the observable symptoms, stayed on the line while the dispatcher asked questions. Is she conscious? Yes. Is she breathing? Yes. Does she have a history of drug use? Unknown. Jennifer tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She went down hard, shoulder hitting the tile wall. Her eyes were wrong, pupils dilated, focus drifting. Kate, please, I didn't mean. The paramedics are coming. I crouched beside her, close enough to help if she fell again, far enough to avoid contaminating any evidence. Stay still. Try to breathe slowly. I didn't mean. Her voice faded, eyes closing, opening, closing again. The bathroom door opened. A woman's voice called out, probably someone checking on the noise. I responded without looking away from Jennifer. Medical emergency. Paramedics are on the way. Can you tell security to clear a path to this bathroom? Footsteps retreating. Jennifer's breathing had changed, slower, shallower. I checked her pulse, elevated but present. Put her in recovery position, left side down, airway clear. Held my hand near her mouth to confirm air movement. Kate. Her eyes opened, struggling to focus. Why aren't you sick? The question hung in the air for 3 seconds. Then Jennifer's face changed as understanding tried to break through the sedative haze. Realization. Horror. The beginning of comprehension that she'd poisoned herself. Her mouth moved. No sound came out. The paramedics arrived at 7:03, 6 minutes from my initial call. Professional, efficient, asking questions while they assessed vitals. I gave them the information I had. Approximately 55-year-old female, sudden onset nausea and vomiting, altered mental status, no known medical history. They asked if she'd ingested anything unusual. I said we'd been at a retirement party, drinking champagne. They asked about medications. I said I didn't know her current prescriptions. They asked about drugs or alcohol. I said I'd seen her have 1 drink. All true, all insufficient. None of it explained why Jennifer Morrison Pierce was losing consciousness on a bathroom floor. They got her on a gurney, started an IV, asked me to ride along since I was family. I texted James, going to hospital with Jennifer. We'll explain later. Then climbed into the ambulance, watching the paramedic work while we moved through Norfolk traffic with lights and sirens. The paramedic was mid-20s, competent, focused. He checked Jennifer's pupils, her breathing, her heart rate, spoke into a radio, updating the hospital on our ETA and presenting symptoms. This looks like intentional overdose. His voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. Benzodiazepines, maybe sedatives. Did your sister have any reason to hurt herself? I chose my words carefully. She's been under financial stress recently. The paramedic nodded, making notes. That fit his narrative. Depressed woman, public event, cry for help that went too far. He had a framework for understanding this, and I wasn't going to complicate it yet. Jennifer's eyes fluttered open. She looked at me, tried to speak. Nothing came out but a mumble. Her hand moved toward mine, then fell back. The paramedic increased the IV flow. "We're going to pump your stomach when we get there." He spoke directly to Jennifer, even though she probably couldn't process the words. "You're going to be okay, but you need to stay with us. Can you hear me?" Jennifer's head moved, maybe a nod, maybe just muscle spasm. The hospital was controlled chaos in the way that emergency departments always are. Organized crisis management. They took Jennifer straight to a bay, pulled curtains for privacy, and started the procedure while I stood outside and listened to her body fight the invasion. Dr. Amanda Foster emerged 20 minutes later, surgical mask pulled down, expression neutral in that way doctors learn early. She introduced herself, shook my hand, and walked me to a consultation room that smelled like industrial cleaner and anxiety. "Your sister ingested a massive dose of Ambien mixed with Xanax." Dr. Foster pulled up a tablet, showing me numbers that probably meant something to people with medical training, potentially fatal combination. "We're pumping her stomach, but some of it's already been absorbed. The next few hours are critical." "How much did she take?" "Based on what we recovered, approximately 25 to 30 tablets. Maybe more. This wasn't accidental." The word hung between us. Intentional, deliberate, suicidal. Or someone tried to hurt her. Dr. Foster watched my face. "Police are on the way. They'll want to talk to you." I nodded. Of course. She left me in the consultation room with a cup of coffee I didn't want, and questions she assumed I couldn't answer. But I could answer all of them. I just wasn't ready to yet. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and spoke carefully. September 21st, 8:52 p.m. Jennifer Morrison Pierce hospitalized after ingesting sedatives at my retirement party. I observed her tampering with my drink at 6:41 p.m. I switched our glasses at 6:43 p.m. She consumed the doctored beverage herself. I have video evidence. I stopped recording, encrypted the file, sent a copy to Rebecca Walsh, my attorney, with instructions to hold it until requested. Then I deleted the sent message, cleared the cache, and sat back in the uncomfortable plastic chair. The truth was documented. The evidence was secured. Now I just had to wait for everyone else to catch up. Detective Marcus Warren arrived at 9:37, after Jennifer had been moved to intensive care, and the medical crisis had transitioned from acute to ongoing. He was early 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of tired that comes from seeing too many people at their worst. He introduced himself, showed his badge, and asked if I was comfortable answering some questions. "Of course," I gestured to the chairs. "Whatever helps." He pulled out a notebook, old school paper instead of digital. Some cops preferred the tactile confirmation of ink on paper, made them feel like they were getting somewhere. "Your sister's husband claims you had motive to harm her." Warren's tone was conversational, but his eyes were cataloging my reactions. Something about a family inheritance dispute? "There's no dispute." I kept my voice level. "My parents' will is clear. Everything comes to me as primary trustee and beneficiary. He says you've been estranged, that you resented your sister's success." The phrase landed with unintentional irony, Jennifer's success, as if the string of failed businesses and mounting debt qualified as success. As if the bankruptcy filing and the embezzlement charges that were about to surface represented achievement. "My sister's success." I repeated the phrase, tasting the absurdity. "Detective, my sister is $890,000 in debt. She's been served foreclosure notices on a house she doesn't own anymore. Her most recent business venture collapsed after 6 months. If you're suggesting I'm jealous of that trajectory, I need you to explain the economics." Warren's pen paused. "So you're successful?" "I'm a 30-year naval intelligence officer. Make your own assessment." "He says you're just military." His wife's words, carried in his voice, "that you never took risks or built anything meaningful." The accusation was so perfectly Jennifer, so precisely the narrative she'd been selling for decades, that I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled out my phone. "Detective, I need to show you something. But first, I need you to understand. I didn't poison my sister. She poisoned herself, and I can prove it." I pulled up the video, angled the phone so Warren could see, pressed play. The footage was shaky. I'd been pretending to scroll, not openly filming, but the essentials were clear. Jennifer at the bar, Jennifer's hand moving to her clutch, Jennifer palming something small, Jennifer's hand hovering over a champagne glass, the wrist tilt, the drop, the casual stirring, the body block positioning, the retreat, Warren watched without speaking. When the video ended, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You filmed this. I'm Naval Intelligence Detective. I document threats. My sister has been a threat for 58 years. I just finally got it on camera." "If you knew she was trying to poison you, why didn't you stop her?" The question was fair. It was also the question that would define everything that came next, because stopping her would have meant another 30 years of her trying. Letting her poison herself means she finally faces consequences. And detective, there's a lot more to this story than poisoning. My sister didn't just try to kill me. She's been embezzling from my parents for 2 years. I have documentation. All of it. Warren's expression shifted. This was becoming complicated in ways he hadn't anticipated when he'd walked into the hospital thinking he had a simple suicide attempt, or maybe a family dispute gone wrong. "How long have you known about the embezzlement?" 6 months. I was building a case. She just accelerated my timeline. He closed his notebook. "Ms. Morrison, I'm going to need you to come to the station tomorrow and make a formal statement. Bring all your documentation. And don't leave the area." "I'm not going anywhere, detective. I just retired. I have all the time in the world." He left. I stayed in the consultation room, watching the clock tick toward midnight, waiting for Jennifer to wake up and realize what she'd done to herself. My phone buzzed. James, asking if I needed him. I texted back, "Tomorrow. Tonight I need to be alone with this." Another message came through. "My attorney, Rebecca Walsh. Got your voice memo. Call me when you can." I didn't call. Instead, I walked out of the hospital into September air that tasted like salt and possibility. Got into my Honda Accord, the car Jennifer had mocked 100 times as evidence of my limited ambition, and drove to the apartment complex I owned, the one where she paid rent every month without knowing who cashed her checks. Parked in the visitor lot, looked up at Unit 847 where lights were still on. Pierce would be there, probably being updated by hospital staff, probably spinning the story into something that made Jennifer the victim and me the villain. Let him spin. Let them all spin. In 72 hours, maybe less, the truth would come out in ways they couldn't ignore or reframe. Jennifer had tried to kill me for an inheritance I didn't need. She'd stolen from parents I'd been supporting. She'd built her entire attack on a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was. And now she'd have to live with the consequences of that ignorance. I pulled out my phone one more time, opened my banking app, checked the balance on the primary account, $843,000. That was just the liquid cash. The real wealth was in properties, in equity, in the portfolio that generated $180,000 a month, whether I paid attention to it or not. Jennifer thought she was killing someone who had something she wanted. She had no idea she was killing the person who'd been quietly funding the life she couldn't sustain on her own. The irony was perfect. The justice was just beginning. I started the car and drove home, ready for tomorrow, ready for the truth, ready for my sister to finally see exactly who I'd become while she was busy underestimating me. The hospital called at 6:32 in the morning. Jennifer was awake, stable, asking for me. Detective Warren wanted me back for follow-up questions. Dr. Foster needed authorization for psychiatric evaluation. The list went on, each request assuming I'd drop everything to manage the crisis Jennifer had created. I was drinking coffee on my balcony overlooking Hampton Roads, watching cargo ships move through water that didn't care about human drama. James had left 20 minutes earlier for his shift at the hospital, kissing my forehead and saying nothing about the fact that I'd barely slept. Sleep required the belief that closing your eyes was safe. I'd spent 58 years learning that lesson backwards. I returned the hospital's call first. Professional courtesy, not familial obligation. "Commander Morrison, this is Nurse Erickson from ICU. Your sister's been asking for you since 4 a.m. She's quite agitated." "Is she medically stable?" "Yes, but..." "Then I'll be there when I'm ready. I have a meeting with my attorney first." The silence on the other end stretched 3 seconds. Hospital staff weren't used to family members prioritizing paperwork over beside vigils. But hospital staff didn't have sisters who'd tried to murder them 12 hours ago. Detective Warren answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been awake working this case instead of sleeping. "Commander Morrison, I need you at the station by 9. I'll be there at 10. I have documentation to organize first." "The station opens at 8. "Detective, I've spent 30 years in intelligence. I know how to prepare for interviews. 10 o'clock. I'll have everything you need." I hung up before he could argue. Control isn't about being difficult. It's about establishing that your timeline matters as much as theirs. Rebecca Walsh arrived at my apartment at 7:45, carrying 2 file boxes and the expression of a lawyer who'd spent the night building a case instead of sleeping. We'd worked together on my estate planning 5 years ago, back when my portfolio had crossed 30 million, and I'd needed someone who understood both wealth preservation and the military's bureaucratic complexity. She'd never asked why a Navy commander needed trusts and LLCs, just built them efficiently and sent quarterly reports. I set her up at my dining table, then pulled out my own documentation, the folder I'd been building for 6 months, since the day I discovered Jennifer's embezzlement, bank statements showing irregular withdrawals from my parents' accounts, forensic analysis tracing those withdrawals to Jennifer's personal checking, screenshots of online transfers, forged signature comparisons, the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream about because it doesn't require testimony, just math. Rebecca went through it page by page, making notes, occasionally pausing to verify a date or cross-reference a transaction. When she finished, she looked up with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with personal concern. "This is airtight," she tapped the folder. "Any prosecutor would take this case. But Kate, once you file these charges, there's no walking it back. Your family will fracture in ways that don't heal." My family fractured 40 years ago, when my parents decided Jennifer's chaos mattered more than my stability. I'm just finally acknowledging it publicly. Rebecca nodded, accepting the answer. "Have you considered what happens when they learn about your actual net worth?" "They'll learn today. Detective Warren is going to want background on motive, which means explaining why Jennifer thought killing me would solve her financial problems. That explanation requires revealing what I actually have. And you're ready for that?" "I've been ready since 1994. I just needed the right moment." Jennifer gave it to me. Rebecca pulled out her own folder, thicker than mine. Financial summary for law enforcement, portfolio breakdown, asset inventory, purchase histories. Every piece of my financial life translated into the language of criminal investigation. "Your parents are going to be shocked." My parents are going to learn they've been living off my charity for 15 years, while believing it was their own retirement savings. Shock is the least of what they'll feel. The police station was concrete and fluorescent lighting, designed to make everyone uncomfortable regardless of guilt. Warren met me in the lobby, escorted me to an interview room that smelled like old coffee and newer anxiety. Rebecca came with me, lawyer privilege making her presence non-negotiable. Warren had printed the video I'd sent him. Stills of Jennifer at the bar, hand over the glass, the incriminating tilt of her wrist. He laid them out like playing cards showing a winning hand. "We recovered your sister's prescription bottle from her purse. Ambien, 30 pills, filled 3 days ago." The bottle was empty. Forensics matched the residue in her stomach to your champagne glass, the one she drank from, the one she poisoned herself. "Correct." Warren's pen moved across his notepad. "Walk me through your relationship with your sister. Why would she want you dead?" I'd prepared for this question. Practiced the answer until it sounded natural instead of rehearsed. "Jennifer and I have been competing since I was born. She's 4 years older, which meant she was always first. First to drive, first to date, first to fail at business ventures she blamed on external circumstances. When I succeeded, military career, financial stability, functional relationships, it threatened her narrative that the world was unfair to her specifically. She needed me to fail so she could feel better about her own failures. That's motive for resentment, not murder." Rebecca opened her folder, slid documents across the table. Bank statements, forensic accounting reports, wire transfer histories. Jennifer has been embezzling from their parents for 2 years. She took $340,000 through forged checks and online transfers. She thought she was stealing from her parents. Actually, she was stealing from Commander Morrison. Warren looked up. "Explain." "For 15 years, I've deposited $7,000 monthly into my parents' accounts. They're elderly, limited income, and I wanted them to live comfortably without the indignity of knowing it was charity. They believe that money is their retirement savings. It's not. It's my support. Jennifer stole from those accounts, which means she stole from me. $340,000 over 24 months. Rebecca added another document, and when Commander Morrison's parents pass away, their will designates her as sole beneficiary. Jennifer discovered this recently. She needed Kate dead before their parents died, so the inheritance would default to her as the surviving child. Warren was writing fast now, pen moving across pages. How much is this inheritance worth? My parents believe they have 6.4 million. I let them believe it because it gives them dignity. But, detective, that's not why Jennifer tried to kill me. She tried to kill me because she's broke, desperate, and has spent 62 years believing my success is somehow theft from her potential. Warren sat back. Your sister's lawyer is claiming this was a suicide attempt, that she was depressed, financially stressed, and chose your retirement party as a public cry for help. Then her lawyer should explain why she put the pills in my glass instead of hers, why she Googled lethal Ambien dosage 3 days before, why she waited until I was distracted to poison a drink she thought I'd consume. Suicidal people don't poison other people's beverages. The interview continued for 90 minutes. Warren asked about family history, financial disputes, prior incidents of conflict. I answered everything, building the narrative brick by brick. Jennifer as golden child who never learned consequences. Me as responsible child who learned to succeed quietly. Parents who enabled one daughter while taking the other for granted. A family dynamic that had been broken for decades, just finally breaking publicly. When we finished, Warren closed his notebook. Commander Morrison, I'll be honest. This case is complicated. Your sister ingested the poison herself, which makes the attempted murder charge legally gray. But the embezzlement is clear. The forged will your attorney mentioned, that's fraud. And if we can prove she planned to kill you, even if the execution failed, that's still attempted murder in Virginia. So what happens next? We investigate, interview witnesses from the party, collect Jennifer's phone and computer, build the timeline. If everything you're telling me is true, it is. Then your sister is going to prison. Good. The word came out harder than I'd intended. Warren noticed. Rebecca noticed. I didn't soften it. Jennifer had earned prison. I wasn't going to apologize for saying so. My parents were waiting in my apartment building lobby when I returned. Mom's eyes were red from crying. Dad's jaw was set in that particular way that meant he'd prepared a speech. They both stood when they saw me, and the choreography felt practiced. Intervention, not conversation. We need to talk. Dad's voice had that forced calm that barely concealed anger. About Jennifer, about this situation, about what you're doing to this family. I'm not doing anything to this family. Jennifer poisoned herself. I'm just not lying about it to make everyone comfortable. Mom's voice broke. She's your sister. She's in the hospital. She could have died. And you're talking to police like she's a criminal? She is a criminal. She tried to murder me. She embezzled $340,000. Would you like to see the forensic accounting, or are we pretending that didn't happen too? They followed me upstairs. Sat on my couch looking uncomfortable in my space. The way people do when they're used to hosting and suddenly find themselves hosted. I made tea I knew they wouldn't drink, playing courtesy while preparing for combat. Dad started. We've been talking to Jennifer's lawyer. He says this is all a misunderstanding, that Jennifer was having a mental health crisis and made a terrible mistake. He says you're blowing this out of proportion because you want attention. Attention. The word tasted like something rotten. I've spent 58 years avoiding attention. I live on a military base. I drive a car older than most officers' children. I don't post on social media. If I wanted attention, there were easier ways to get it than letting my sister poison herself at my retirement party. Mom leaned forward. Kate, please. We know Jennifer has problems. We know she's made mistakes, but she's still family. Can't we handle this privately? Without police, without charges, without destroying what's left of our family? There it was. The request I'd been expecting since the hospital called. Handle it privately, keep the peace, protect Jennifer from consequences while asking me to absorb the damage. The same pattern that had been running since I was 17 and found pills planted in my room. I pulled out my laptop, opened the financial tracking spreadsheet I'd been maintaining since 2009, turned the screen toward them. Do you recognize these transactions? Dad squinted at the numbers. Those are our bank accounts. Look at the deposits. Monthly, $7,000, same day, every month. 15 years of deposits. Do you remember making these deposits? They stared at the screen, confusion slowly shifting to comprehension. That's our retirement money. Mom's voice was uncertain now. We've been saving. You haven't been saving anything. I've been depositing $7,000 a month into your accounts since 2009. 15 years. 84,000 per year. 1.26 million total. That's not your retirement savings. That's my gift. I wanted you to live comfortably without feeling like charity cases. So I never told you. The silence in the room had weight. Dad's face had gone pale. Mom's hand covered her mouth. I continued, "Now look at these withdrawals, the highlighted ones. Those are irregular, large amounts transferred online to an account that's not yours. $340,000 over 2 years. Do you recognize those transfers?" They didn't answer. They didn't need to. The truth was obvious in the account numbers, the dates, the pattern of theft. Jennifer stole from you. Except she didn't steal from you. She stole from me. Because everything in those accounts is money I gave you. Your daughter forged your signatures, accessed your accounts, and took $340,000 of my money. And when I was about to discover it, she decided murder was easier than accountability. Mom was crying openly now. "We didn't know. Kate, we didn't know any of this. You didn't want to know." There's a difference. Jennifer's been stealing, lying, and sabotaging for 40 years. You've been excusing, enabling, and asking me to be the bigger person. I'm done being bigger. I'm done shrinking so she feels adequate. I'm done pretending this is normal. Dad found his voice. "What do you want us to do?" "I want you to tell the truth. To police, to lawyers, to family. I want you to stop protecting Jennifer from reality. And I want you to understand that the will you have, the one leaving everything to me, that's staying unchanged. Because there is no family estate. There's my money that I've been letting you hold so you felt independent. Jennifer tried to kill me for an inheritance that was never real, and I'm not rewarding attempted murder with financial compensation." Mom stood up shaking. "You're choosing money over your sister." "No, I'm choosing survival over suicide. Jennifer chose money over my life. I'm just choosing not to die for it." They left without finishing their tea. I watched them go, knowing the next time I saw them would be in a courtroom, knowing the relationship had crossed a threshold that didn't have a return path. Families can survive a lot. They rarely survive someone saying out loud what everyone had been pretending not to see for decades. My phone rang while I was standing at the window. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Commander Morrison? This is Pierce. We need to talk." Jennifer's husband. The man who'd been living in my apartment complex for 3 years, paying me rent without knowing it, probably rehearsing whatever threat he'd prepared. "Pierce, what can I do for you?" "You can drop this vindictive crusade against my wife." His voice had that edge of barely controlled rage. "She's sick. She needs help, not prosecution. And if you don't back off, I'm going to sue you for everything. False accusations, emotional distress, defamation." "Pierce, what's your address?" "What? Your address. Where do you live?" "You know where I live. Harbor View Apartments, Unit 847. Why? What's your monthly rent?" $2,800. What does that have to do with— "I'm your landlord. Have been for 5 years. You're 2 months behind, which I've overlooked because you're family. But if you sue me, I'll evict you and report the $340,000 Jennifer embezzled. Your choice." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then his voice came back, smaller, uncertain. "You own the building?" "I own 14 buildings in Norfolk. Harbor View is my smallest investment. I also own 60% of Pierce Engineering, the company where you work as CEO. Your business partner sold me his shares in 2015 when he needed cash for his divorce. So technically, Pierce, you work for me. Still want to talk about lawsuits?" The call disconnected. I set the phone down and felt something close to satisfaction. Not revenge. Revenge would have been petty. This was boundaries. Clear, financial, unambiguous. Jennifer had tried to kill me. Pierce had enabled her by threatening legal action. Now they both understood exactly how much power I'd been hiding while they'd been underestimating me. Detective Warren called that afternoon with updates. Forensics had confirmed Ambien and Xanax in lethal concentrations. Jennifer's phone showed Google searches for undetectable poisons, drug overdose symptoms, and inheritance law in Virginia. Her computer had draft emails to the Washington Post about alleged corruption in naval intelligence, all targeting my name specifically. The evidence was building from suspicious to damning. But there was more. Warren's voice carried a different tone now, less investigative, more complicated. "We found something in Jennifer's documents. A second will. dated 2023, splitting your parents' estate 50-50 between you and her. But your attorney says the real will is from 2019 and names only you. Rebecca's already examined it. The 2023 will is forged, signatures don't match, notary stamp is fake. Jennifer created it using an online legal service, planning to produce it after our parents died, or after I died, whichever came first. So she wasn't just trying to kill you for the inheritance. She was trying to kill you, inherit your estate through your parents, then use a forged will to claim half. That's a $20 million plan, detective. Jennifer doesn't dream small. She just executes poorly. Warren said he'd be in touch about formal charges. I told him my attorney would coordinate. Professional courtesy, nothing more. The case was moving from personal to procedural, which meant I could step back and let systems do what families couldn't, hold Jennifer accountable. I drove to Thomas Grayson's office that evening. He managed my portfolio, had for 12 years. Ever since my net worth crossed $5 million and Fidelity's standard management wasn't sufficient anymore. His office overlooked the Elizabeth River, floor-to-ceiling windows giving a view that cost money just to occupy. He'd prepared the full accounting I'd requested, every asset itemized, every value current as of market close. The real estate alone was $52.3 million. 14 properties across Virginia, mostly commercial, all generating positive cash flow. The Officers Club building was worth $12.3 million now, appreciated $500,000 since I'd bought it. Harborview Apartments, where Jennifer lived without knowing I was landlord, had appreciated to $8.1 million. Every property I owned had been purchased at distressed prices and held until value recovered. Patience as investment strategy. Investment portfolio was $14.1 million. Stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency I'd bought in 2011 when Bitcoin was $18 and people called it fake money. That position alone was worth $4.9 million now. The irony was perfect. Jennifer had mocked me for buying digital assets while she was flipping houses with borrowed money. My funny money had outperformed her real estate by 300%. Business interests added another $5 million. The 60% stake in Pierce Engineering that I'd casually mentioned to Jennifer's husband. Silent partnership positions in 3 veteran-owned businesses that I'd funded when banks wouldn't. Returns that range from adequate to excellent, all requiring zero day-to-day involvement. Total net worth $57.2 million. Annual passive income $2.1 million, most of it from real estate. My Navy pension when it kicked in, $63,000 per year, a rounding error. Thomas walked me through tax optimization, estate planning updates, the mechanics of wealth that most people never needed to understand. Then he asked the question that financial advisors eventually ask wealthy clients who live like they're not. Kate, why do you still live on base and drive that Honda? Because the moment my family knows I have money, I become an ATM, not a person. My wealth isn't a secret. It's a boundary. The minute I cross it, every crisis becomes my responsibility to solve. Every failure becomes my fault for not preventing. Every success becomes luck instead of discipline. What changed? You're about to cross that boundary publicly. Jennifer changed it. She tried to murder me. That requires a response that money makes possible. And honestly, Thomas, I'm tired. 58 years of hiding is enough. Let them see who I actually am. Let them deal with the reality they've been denying. He nodded, understanding, in the way that people who manage significant wealth understand. Money is both freedom and obligation. And choosing which aspects to accept is what separates people who keep wealth from people who lose it. My phone buzzed while I was leaving Thomas's office. Jennifer's lawyer, Martin Cross. I let it go to voicemail, listened to the message while driving home. Commander Morrison, this is Martin Cross representing Jennifer Morrison Pierce. We need to discuss a resolution. My client is willing to enter a plea agreement on the embezzlement charges in exchange for dropping the attempted murder allegations. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss terms. I deleted the message without responding. Jennifer's lawyer thought this was negotiable. He still believed the family would pressure me into compromise, that blood would prove thicker than evidence. He didn't understand that I'd been building this case for months, that attempted murder wasn't a charge I was pressing. It was a crime Jennifer had committed on camera. His client didn't get to negotiate consequences after self-administering poison meant for me. Emma called that evening. Jennifer's daughter, 28, the one who'd always seemed to see through her mother's performance better than anyone else in the family. "Aunt Kate, can we talk?" Her voice was careful, testing whether I was safe to approach. I'd always been the aunt who taught her to fish, who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders, who showed up at college graduation when Jennifer had been too busy with whatever business venture was currently imploding. Of course, sweetheart. Mom told me you poisoned her, but the news is saying she poisoned you. I don't know what to believe. The honesty was refreshing. Most family members had already chosen sides based on loyalty rather than evidence. "Emma, I'm going to tell you something true, and you can decide. Your mother put pills in my drink because she thought I was inheriting money she wanted. What she didn't know is that money was always mine. I've been supporting your grandparents for 15 years. I have $57 million in assets. I never needed the inheritance. She tried to kill me for money. I was already planning to share with the family." The silence on her end lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then her voice came back, smaller, processing. "Mom's been saying you're selfish and rich and cruel. Emma, I own the building you grew up in. Your college tuition? I paid 40% through a scholarship fund I created anonymously. Your mother doesn't know because I never wanted credit. I wanted you to have opportunities. That's not cruelty. That's love. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because wealth changes relationships. I wanted you to know me as Aunt Kate who taught you to fish, not Aunt Kate who has money. The minute people know you're wealthy, you stop being human and start being opportunity. I didn't want that with you." Her voice broke. "I believe you. And if you need me to testify, I will." That offer mattered more than she could know. Family testimony against family was rare, carried weight precisely because it was so costly. Emma was choosing truth over comfort, evidence over loyalty. She'd learned something her mother never had. Integrity is worth more than position. The arraignment was scheduled for October 2nd, 10 days after Jennifer had collapsed at my retirement party. Enough time for toxicology reports to finalize, for the district attorney to review evidence, for charges to be formalized beyond preliminary detention. I dressed carefully that morning. Navy blazer, white shirt, simple jewelry. Professional without being military, serious without being performative. The courthouse would be full of cameras, reporters who'd picked up the story from the initial police reports and turned it into the kind of narrative that sold papers. Rich Navy officer's sister tries to poison her for inheritance. The courthouse steps were already crowded when Rebecca and I arrived. Cameras swiveling, reporters calling questions. That feeding frenzy energy that happens when a good story gets better. I walked past them without responding, knowing anything I said would be edited into sound bites that served someone else's narrative. Inside, the courtroom was formal wood paneling and government seals. Jennifer sat at the defense table in clothes her lawyer had clearly chosen to make her look sympathetic. Simple dress, minimal makeup, the performance of contrition she'd perfected over decades. She didn't look at me when I entered. Smart. Eye contact would have required her to acknowledge what she'd done, and Jennifer had never been good at accountability. The charges were read in that particular bureaucratic cadence that made attempted murder sound like paperwork. Count 1, attempted murder in the first degree. Count 2, embezzlement exceeding $250,000. Count 3, forgery of legal documents. Count 4, wire fraud. Each charge carried years of potential prison time. Combined, they carried decades. Jennifer's lawyer, Martin Cross, stood for bail hearing. His argument was predictable. Respected community member, no prior criminal record. Strong family ties, low flight risk. He painted Jennifer as a woman in crisis who'd made a terrible mistake, not a calculating criminal who'd spent months planning murder and theft. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos, stood with a different story. Premeditated attempted murder, 2 years of systematic embezzlement, forged legal documents, evidence of planning including internet searches and draft documents targeting the victim. She argued Jennifer was a flight risk with access to embezzled funds and motive to disappear. Judge Catherine Reeves listened to both arguments, then asked the question that mattered. "Does the victim wish to make a statement regarding bail?" Rebecca nodded to me. I stood, walked to the podium, aware of every camera in the room focusing on this moment. The victim speaking, the sister who'd been poisoned, standing up to request her would-be murderer stay locked up, the narrative writing itself in real time. Your Honor, my sister didn't just attack me, she attacked my belief that family is safe. For 30 years, I walked into my parents' home wondering what version of events Jennifer would present. I walked into my career wondering what anonymous complaint had been filed. I walked into my retirement wondering if I'd survive the party. She stole my sense of security before she ever tried to steal my life. She stole my ability to trust before she stole $340,000. She stole my family's objectivity before she poisoned my champagne. The financial cost to my parents was $340,000. The cost to my career was 12 hours in a hospital and police interviews. But the cost to my life? I can't quantify that. How do you measure 30 years of vigilance at Thanksgiving dinner? I don't want revenge. I want accountability. I want my sister to understand that actions have consequences, even when you're family, especially when you're family, because family isn't a shield from justice. It's a responsibility to truth. Your Honor, I ask that bail be denied. My sister has means, motive, and clearly the willingness to commit crimes. She tried to kill one obstacle to her financial goals. I don't want to give her opportunity to try again. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Judge Reeves made notes, looked at Jennifer, looked back at me. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. She turned to Jennifer's lawyer. Mr. Cross, your client may petition for bail reconsideration after 30 days if circumstances change. The gavel came down. Jennifer's face crumpled. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm, probably warning her not to react publicly. But Jennifer couldn't help herself. She looked at me finally, across the courtroom, and the expression was pure hatred mixed with disbelief. How dare you? How dare you send your own sister to jail? I held her gaze for 3 seconds, long enough for her to see I wasn't afraid, wasn't apologetic, wasn't going to rescue her from consequences she'd engineered. Then I turned and walked out while deputies took her back to holding. The courthouse steps were chaos. Reporters shouting questions, cameras pushing close, everyone wanting the soundbite that would lead the evening news. Rebecca had warned me this would happen, had prepared me for the performance that victims were expected to give. Grateful, relieved, appropriately emotional. I gave them something different. My sister tried to kill me at my retirement party on September 21st. She did this because she believed I was inheriting $8 million from our parents. What she didn't know is that $8 million was my money. I've been supporting our parents financially for 15 years, depositing over $1.2 million into their accounts so they could live with dignity. Jennifer stole $340,000 of that money through forgery. When she discovered I was the sole heir in our parents' will, she forged a second will to steal half. And when she realized I would discover her crimes, she decided murder was simpler than accountability. I am a 30-year naval intelligence officer. I have devoted my life to protecting this country. I never imagined the greatest threat I'd face would be at my own retirement party, from my own sister, over money I was planning to share anyway. But this case isn't just about money or murder. It's about a lifetime of being underestimated. My family thought I was just military, living paycheck to paycheck, needing their approval and validation. They were wrong. I built a $57 million portfolio through discipline and patience. I didn't tell my family because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. My sister taught me that was naive. Your Honor denied bail today. I'm grateful. My sister has the means, motive, and proven willingness to commit crimes. She already tried to kill me once. I don't want to become a second attempt. The reporters erupted with follow-up questions. How did you build $57 million? Were you hiding wealth from your family? Do you feel guilty about your sister going to jail? I answered none of them. The statement was complete. Anything more would be performance, and I was done performing. Rebecca and I walked to her car through a gauntlet of cameras. My phone was already exploding with messages. News alerts, family members, former colleagues, everyone suddenly needing to comment on the revelation that Commander Kate Morrison wasn't just military. She was wealthy in ways that made her sister's murder attempt both more understandable and more damning. The headline hit within an hour. Navy commander reveals 57 million fortune while sister faces murder charges. By evening, it was national. Cable news running segments. Financial websites analyzing how a military officer built that kind of wealth. Social media dividing between people who thought Jennifer was evil and people who thought I was cruel for not helping her. I ignored all of it, turned off my phone, went home, sat on my balcony watching ships in the harbor. James found me there at sunset, bottle of wine and 2 glasses, understanding without needing explanation. The world knows now. He poured wine, handed me a glass. Good. Let them know. I spent 58 years being invisible. Let's see what happens when I'm unavoidable. He touched his glass to mine, to being unavoidable, to being exactly who I built myself to be. We sat in comfortable silence while the sun turned the water orange and gold. Somewhere across town, Jennifer was in a cell, finally facing consequences she couldn't manipulate or escape. My parents were probably calling each other, trying to process the revelation that their careful retirement was actually my careful generosity. Pierce was probably calculating whether he could afford rent once I stopped being lenient about late payments. And I was here, wine in hand, partner beside me, $57 million in assets that nobody could take away, and zero obligation to make anyone comfortable with the truth. The irony was perfect, the justice was just beginning, and for the first time in 58 years, I was exactly who I'd always been, without apology or explanation. The trial date was set for November 18th, 48 days after Jennifer had collapsed at my retirement party. Enough time for both sides to prepare, for media attention to build, for everyone in my family to choose their position and defend it publicly. I spent those weeks building the life I'd hidden for 30 years. Moved out of base housing into a waterfront condo in Virginia Beach that I'd owned since 2016 but never occupied. 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, monthly HOA fees that exceeded most people's rent. The furniture I ordered was expensive without being ostentatious, quality that would last decades, not trends that would fade in seasons. James moved in without ceremony, bringing his books and his coffee maker, and the quiet presence that made space feel like home instead of just property. We fell into routines that felt simultaneously new and ancient: morning coffee on the balcony, evening walks on the beach, conversations that didn't require performing for anyone's comfort. The Morrison Foundation launched on October 15th with $15 million in initial funding. Focus on women veterans transitioning to civilian life, specifically around financial literacy and entrepreneurship. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 30 years hiding wealth while my sister floundered financially, and now I was teaching other women how to build what I'd been too afraid to show I had. Emma became the foundation's first board member. Jennifer's daughter, choosing her aunt over her mother, making a statement that family loyalty didn't require blind allegiance. She brought perspective I needed, someone who understood both sides, who'd watched Jennifer's chaos and my silence, who could articulate what the next generation needed that ours had gotten wrong. Marcus, Jennifer's son, called 2 weeks before trial. His voice carried the particular exhaustion of someone who'd spent too long holding incompatible truths. "Aunt Kate, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening?" "Mom asked me to testify, to say you've always been jealous of her, that you sabotaged her businesses, that you've been planning this for years. She has a whole story mapped out." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her no." He exhaled slowly. "I told her I watched you pay for my car insurance for 3 years when I was in college. I told her I know you funded that scholarship I got, the one that said it was from an anonymous donor. I told her I'm not lying in court to protect someone who tried to murder you." The silence stretched between us, filled with everything neither of us could say about watching a parent self-destruct while knowing you couldn't save them. "Thank you, Marcus. She's my mom." His voice cracked slightly. "But that doesn't mean she's right. And it doesn't mean I have to lie for her." He hung up. I sat with the weight of that conversation, understanding what it cost him to choose truth over comfort, evidence over loyalty. Jennifer had lost her children, not because I'd turned them against her, but because she'd shown them exactly who she was, and they decided it wasn't enough. The pretrial hearing was procedural theater, motions filed, evidence cataloged, witness lists exchanged. Jennifer's defense team had shifted strategy after the arraignment publicity. No longer claiming suicide attempt. Too many Google searches proved premeditation. Instead, they were building an insanity defense: mental health crisis, undiagnosed bipolar disorder, diminished capacity. Jennifer as victim of her own brain chemistry. not perpetrator of calculated crime. Rebecca walked me through their likely approach: character witnesses testifying to Jennifer's erratic behavior, expert testimony about mood disorders and impulse control, family members describing stress, desperation, the kind of pressure that breaks people. "They're going to make you the villain." Rebecca's voice was matter-of-fact. Rich sister who could have helped but didn't. Successful while Jennifer struggled. They'll paint your wealth as cruelty by omission. Let them. "I've spent 58 years being misunderstood. I can handle 58 more days." The defense witness list confirmed Rebecca's prediction. My parents, testifying about Jennifer's financial stress and mental health concerns. Pierce, describing his wife's deteriorating emotional state. A psychiatrist who'd evaluated Jennifer twice in pretrial detention and diagnosed bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Friends who'd seen Jennifer crying, anxious, increasingly unstable in the months before the poisoning. What they didn't have was evidence that any of it excused attempted murder. Mental illness explained behavior. It didn't justify it. And Jennifer's Google searches proved she'd known exactly what she was doing when she'd crushed those pills. The prosecution's witness list was shorter, but more damning. Forensic accountant tracing the embezzlement. Digital forensics expert explaining Jennifer's internet history. The bartender who'd served drinks that night. Admiral Richardson, who'd been 3 feet away when Jennifer gave her toast. And me. Maria Santos, the prosecutor, met with me 5 days before trial. Her office was government issue efficiency. Diplomas on walls, case files stacked precisely. Nothing personal except a photo of 2 teenage boys. She'd been trying cases for 15 years, which meant she'd seen every defense strategy and most jury reactions. "I need you to understand something, Commander Morrison." She leaned forward, hands folded on her desk. "This trial isn't really about whether your sister tried to kill you. The video and forensics prove that conclusively. This trial is about whether the jury believes she deserves punishment or pity. And you need me to make them believe she deserves punishment. I need you to be honest. Juries can smell performance. They can detect rehearsed emotion. Your job isn't to convince them your sister is evil. Your job is to show them you're human, you've been hurt, and consequences matter regardless of family ties." The trial opened on a Monday morning cold enough that the courthouse steps were slick with ice nobody had bothered salting. News vans lined the street, cameras tracking every arrival. Jennifer's defense team arrived first, professional sympathy radiating from every gesture. Then the prosecution, grim efficiency. Then me, Rebecca beside me, James staying back to avoid media attention. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and expensive perfume someone had worn too heavily. Jennifer sat at the defense table looking thinner than she'd been at my retirement party. Hair pulled back severely, wearing glasses I'd never seen her use before. The glasses were strategic, made her look studious, harmless, nothing like someone who'd Googled lethal drug dosages. Jury selection took 2 days. 12 people and 4 alternates, screened for bias, questioned about family relationships, asked whether they could separate sympathy from justice. The final jury was 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from 23 to 68. Half had siblings, 3 had served in military, 2 worked in healthcare. Demographics that could break either direction depending on how testimony landed. Maria Santos's opening statement was surgical precision. 32 minutes outlining evidence, timeline, motive. She walked the jury through Jennifer's embezzlement, the forged will, the financial desperation. Showed photos of the retirement party, the champagne glasses, the prescription bottle. Played the video of Jennifer poisoning the drink, her hand movements deliberate and practiced. "This isn't a story about family conflict." Her voice carried across the courtroom without amplification. "This is a story about premeditated murder that failed only because the intended victim was smarter than the perpetrator." Jennifer Morrison Pierce researched lethal dosages. She brought pills to a public event. She waited for her sister to be distracted, poisoned a beverage, and walked away expecting Catherine Morrison to consume it and die. The only reason we're in a courtroom instead of a funeral home is because Commander Morrison saw the attack coming and switched the glasses. Jennifer Morrison Pierce poisoned herself with the murder weapon she'd prepared for her sister. Martin Cross's opening was twice as long and half as effective. He painted Jennifer as tortured soul, mentally ill woman driven to desperate act by lifetime of inadequacy. He described my success as implicit cruelty, wealth I could have shared but hoarded while Jennifer suffered. He framed the poisoning not as murder, but as cry for help that went tragically wrong. Jennifer Morrison Pierce is sick. His voice had that particular earnestness that lawyers deploy when facts aren't sufficient. She's been suffering from undiagnosed bipolar disorder for decades. The financial stress, the family pressure, the sense that her sister had everything while she had nothing, it broke her. What she did was wrong. We're not denying that. But it wasn't murder. It was the desperate act of a desperate woman who needed help, not judgment. The jury listened without visible reaction. Good jurors, doing their job, waiting for evidence before deciding who deserved their sympathy. The prosecution's case built methodically over 6 days. Forensic accountant testified about the embezzlement, showing transaction by transaction how Jennifer had stolen $340,000. Digital forensics expert walked through Jennifer's Google searches, each query more incriminating than the last. How much Ambien is lethal? Undetectable poisons. Inheritance law when sibling dies before parents. The searches painted intent that no mental illness defense could obscure. The bartender testified that Jennifer had been calm, focused, nothing erratic about her behavior at the party. Admiral Richardson confirmed Jennifer's toast had been pointed, calculated, designed to diminish me publicly. The paramedic who treated Jennifer described her asking why I wasn't sick. The moment Jennifer realized she'd poisoned herself instead of me. Then it was my turn. Maria Santos called me to the stand on day 7. I'd worn Navy dress uniform, not for sympathy, but because it represented 30 years of service that Jennifer had dismissed as following orders. I swore oath on Constitution I defended, sat in witness box that suddenly felt smaller than it should, and prepared to explain my sister to 12 strangers. Commander Morrison, walk us through your relationship with your sister. I'd prepared for this. Practiced with Rebecca until the timeline felt natural, the emotions controlled. But sitting in that box, Jennifer 10 feet away, jury watching every micro-expression, the preparation felt inadequate against the weight of truth. Jennifer is 4 years older. Growing up, she was the golden child. Smart, charismatic, everyone's favorite. When I was born, that changed. Suddenly there were 2 daughters, and I was the easy one. Self-sufficient. Didn't need attention. My parents gave Jennifer the energy she demanded, and gave me the peace I seemed to want. Everyone was happy with that arrangement except me. When did the dynamic become hostile? When I started succeeding. I got into Naval Academy. Jennifer said I was running from real life. I graduated with honors. She said military officers just follow orders. I built a career in intelligence. She told people I pushed papers and pretended it was important. Every achievement I had, Jennifer reframed as something less than it was. And our parents let her, because correcting her meant conflict, and conflict meant Jennifer would create drama that consumed everyone's energy. Why didn't you tell your family about your wealth? I took a breath, felt the weight of 30 years of silence pressing against vocal cords. Because the moment they knew I had money, I'd stop being Kate and start being resource. Every crisis would become my responsibility to solve. Every failure would be my fault for not preventing. Every success would be diminished to luck or privilege instead of discipline. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I could provide. That's why I supported my parents anonymously. That's why I funded my niece and nephew's education through scholarships. That's why I stayed invisible. Because visibility meant becoming an ATM, and I wanted to stay human. The courtroom was silent. Maria let it breathe before continuing. When did you discover Jennifer was embezzling from your parents? March 23rd, 2024. My father mentioned unusual withdrawals. I investigated and found 2 years of theft. $340,000, taken through forged signatures and online transfers. I documented everything and hired a forensic accountant. I was planning to confront Jennifer after building an airtight case. She accelerated that timeline by trying to kill me. Walk us through the retirement party. What did you see? I described it minute by minute. Jennifer's arrival, the positioning at the bar, the moment I'd seen her hand move over my glass, the decision to switch glasses instead of confronting her, watching her drink the poison she'd meant for me, the collapse, the hospital, the realization that my sister had tried to murder me and I'd let her poison herself. Maria introduced the video, played it for the jury on large screen where every detail was visible. Jennifer's hand palming the pills, the casual glance around checking for witnesses, the wrist tilt dropping pills into champagne, the stirring, the retreat, then returning later to pick up what she thought was her cocktail, drinking it during her toast, the satisfied look on her face that said everything about intent. "Commander Morrison, why didn't you stop her?" The question hung in air. The defense would hammer this. I'd let Jennifer poison herself, which made me either complicit or cruel. But the truth was neither. Because stopping her would have meant another 30 years of her trying. Jennifer has sabotaged me since I was 17. She planted drugs in my room to derail my Naval Academy application. She destroyed my scholarship paperwork. She filed anonymous complaints about my career. She testified in my divorce that I was unstable. Every time she got away with it because I couldn't prove intent, and our family preferred peace over truth. This time, she committed a crime on camera. This time, there was no ambiguity. This time, consequence was unavoidable. So no, I didn't stop her. I documented her crime and let justice work the way it's supposed to. Martin Cross's cross-examination tried to paint me as calculated, cold, someone who'd set trap for her own sister. He asked about my wealth, suggesting I'd been hoarding resources while Jennifer suffered. He questioned why I'd funded anonymous scholarships instead of helping Jennifer directly. He implied my silence about finances was manipulation, not boundary setting. But every question gave me opportunity to clarify. Yes, I had $57 million. I'd earned it through discipline and strategic investing over 30 years. No, I hadn't helped Jennifer's businesses because Jennifer's businesses failed due to poor planning and blame shifting. And funding them would have been enabling, not helping. Yes, I'd kept my wealth private because privacy is not the same as secrecy and boundaries are not the same as cruelty. The defense's case opened with my parents. Mom testified first, crying through description of Jennifer's struggles, the failed businesses, the divorce, the financial desperation. She painted Jennifer as overwhelmed single mother who'd made terrible mistake under unbearable pressure. But on cross-examination, Maria asked the questions that mattered. Did you know Jennifer was stealing from your accounts? No. Did you know that money was actually from Kate's monthly deposits? No. Did Jennifer ask for help before resorting to theft? Silence. Did Jennifer ask for help before attempting murder? Longer silence. Dad's testimony followed the same pattern. He described Jennifer as troubled but loving, someone who'd cracked under pressure. But he couldn't explain the Google searches, the premeditation, the months of planning. He couldn't reconcile a loving sister with someone who'd researched lethal dosages and brought pills to a public event. Pierce testified about Jennifer's deteriorating mental state, but on cross-examination admitted he'd seen the forged will in her desk and said nothing. Admitted he'd known about the embezzlement and helped her hide it. His testimony meant to garner sympathy instead revealed complicity. The psychiatrist testified about bipolar disorder, but acknowledged Jennifer had never been diagnosed before her arrest. Acknowledged that mental illness didn't preclude criminal intent. Acknowledged that someone could be both mentally ill and capable of premeditated crime. Then the defense called Jennifer. She took the stand wearing the same glasses, the same subdued clothing, the same performed contrition. Martin Cross walked her through prepared testimony, financial desperation, mounting pressure. Sensed that her life was collapsing while mine flourished. Impulse to hurt me that spiraled into terrible decision. I was desperate. Her voice broke in practiced places. I'd lost everything. My business, my marriage, my dignity. And Kate had everything. Money, career, respect. She could have helped me, she could have saved me. But she just watched me drown. So I snapped. I brought the pills to hurt her, to make her feel what I felt. But I didn't want to kill her. I just wanted her to understand what it's like to suffer. The performance was good. Jennifer had always been good at performance. But performance doesn't hold up against video evidence and internet searches. Maria Santos's cross-examination was methodical destruction. She walked Jennifer through every Google search. How much Ambien is lethal? That's not impulse, that's research. Inheritance law when sibling dies. That's not suffering, that's planning. She showed the video again, Jennifer's hand moving with practiced precision over the champagne glass. Ms. Morrison Pierce, you testified you didn't want to kill your sister. But you researched lethal dosages. You brought 30 pills to a public event. You waited until she was distracted to poison her drink. That's not impulse. That's premeditation. That's attempted murder. And the only reason it failed is because your sister was smarter than you expected. Jennifer's face crumbled. The performance couldn't hold against facts. She tried to explain, to justify, to make it sound less calculated than it was. But every word dug the hole deeper. I needed. She couldn't finish, couldn't articulate what she'd wanted beyond my absence, my failure, my death making room for her to feel adequate. The defense rested. Both sides gave closing arguments. Martin Cross pleaded for mercy, for understanding that mental illness mitigated culpability. Maria Santos countered that mental illness explained but didn't excuse, that premeditation proved intent regardless of emotional state. The jury deliberated 4 hours, came back with verdict that surprised nobody who'd watched evidence. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, embezzlement, forgery, wire fraud. Jennifer sat motionless while verdicts were read, each guilty hitting like physical blow. Sentencing was scheduled 3 weeks later, gave time for pre-sentence investigation, victim impact statements, final arguments about how many years a sister's attempted murder deserved. I spent those weeks preparing statement I'd been writing mentally for 30 years. What do you say to someone who tried to kill you? How do you articulate lifetime of small cruelties that culminated in pills dissolving in champagne? The courtroom was packed for sentencing. Media, family, people who'd followed the trial and wanted to see conclusion. Jennifer sat at defense table looking diminished, glasses gone. The performance finally dropped. She knew what was coming. Question was only how much. Judge Reeves asked if I wanted to make victim impact statement. I stood, walked to podium, faced Jennifer across courtroom one last time. Jennifer, you tried to kill me for money I was planning to share anyway. That's the tragedy here. Not that you failed, but that you tried. I had a plan. After retirement, I was going to establish family trust. $10 million for our parents' care. $5 million split among your children for education and homes. $2 million for you, managed by trustees so you couldn't squander it, but available to finally build something sustainable. You would have had financial security for life. You would have seen your kids educated. You would have had chance to succeed. But you couldn't wait, couldn't ask, couldn't trust that I loved you enough to share. You tried to kill me instead, so now there's no trust, no bakery, no second chances. The $2 million I set aside for you, I donated it to Morrison Foundation for Women Veterans, in your name, so everyone will know. Jennifer Morrison Pierce tried to murder her sister, and her sister turned that hatred into help for others. I don't hate you, Jennifer. I pity you. You spent 62 years competing with sister who was never your enemy. You lost family who loved you because you couldn't imagine being loved alongside me instead of me. I hope prison teaches you what 62 years of freedom couldn't. There was always enough. Enough money. Enough love. Enough room for both of us. You just never believed it. Jennifer sobbed, tried to speak. Judge Reeves raised hand, stopping her. Ms. Morrison Pierce, you've had your chance to speak. Now it's time to listen. You attempted to murder your sister. You stole from your parents. You forged legal documents. You showed no remorse until caught, no accountability until confronted with irrefutable evidence. You targeted someone who'd been supporting your family anonymously for years, someone who'd planned to help you, someone who'd only ever asked to be left alone to succeed quietly. The court finds your actions calculated, cruel, and completely devoid of mitigating circumstances that would justify leniency. The sentence came down methodically. Attempted murder, 15 years. Embezzlement, 5 years concurrent. Forgery, 3 years concurrent. Wire fraud, 5 years consecutive. Total, 20 years in federal prison. Restitution, $340,000 to me, $2 million to insurance company Jennifer had fraudulently claimed against. No parole eligibility for 12 years. Jennifer collapsed. Lawyers tried to steady her. Deputies moved to take her into custody. She looked at me one final time, expression mixing hatred with incomprehension. How could you do this to your own sister? I held her gaze until deputies led her away. She still didn't understand. After everything, she still believed she was the victim. The media erupted on courthouse steps. Same questions as before. Different energy now that verdict was final. I gave brief statement thanking the justice system, the jury, the prosecutor. Acknowledged that family relationships were complicated, but crime was not. Said I hoped Jennifer would use 20 years to develop accountability she'd avoided for 62. Then Rebecca and I walked away while cameras captured the moment. Victim who'd survived attempted murder moving forward while perpetrator moved toward prison. My phone exploded with messages, some supportive, some accusing me of cruelty, some asking how I could send my own sister to prison. I turned it off. The trial was over. The verdict was in. Nothing anyone said would change what Jennifer had done or what justice required. Emma and Marcus came to my condo that evening. Brought takeout nobody would eat, sat on my balcony overlooking ocean that kept moving regardless of human drama. Is it wrong that I'm relieved? Emma's voice was small. That she's in prison and we don't have to pretend anymore? No. I reached for her hand. Relieved isn't the same as happy. You can be sad your mother is in prison and relieved she can't hurt anyone for 12 years. Both things are true. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now you live. You build careers and relationships and lives that aren't defined by managing your mother's chaos. You remember she's still your mother, but you don't have to light yourself on fire to keep her warm. Will you ever forgive her? I already have. Forgiveness isn't for her. It's for me. It means I don't carry her hatred anymore. But forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can forgive her and never want to see her again. Both things are true. We sat in comfortable silence while sun set over Atlantic. These kids, adults now really, had lost their mother not to prison, but to choices made long before pills dissolved in champagne. They'd chosen truth over loyalty, evidence over comfort. They'd survived this because they'd learned what Jennifer never had. Integrity matters more than appearance, and family is an excuse for enabling harm. The Morrison Foundation's first grant recipient was named 3 days after sentencing. Marine Corps veteran, 38, transitioning to civilian life with business plan for contracting company. Needed capital and mentorship. We provided both, along with financial literacy training and strategic planning support. The kind of help Jennifer could have had if she'd asked instead of stolen, if she'd built instead of blamed. Emma joined the foundation full-time. Marcus stayed in his engineering job but served on advisory board. Both of them channeling family dysfunction into constructive purpose, turning Jennifer's crime into catalyst for helping women veterans build wealth Jennifer had never figured out how to create. My parents reached out 6 months after sentencing, asked to meet, to talk, to try rebuilding relationship that had shattered under weight of truth. I agreed to coffee, neutral location, time-limited conversation. Rebecca advised me to document everything, but this wasn't legal anymore. This was just family, whatever that meant after everything. They looked older, Dad's hair fully gray now, Mom moving carefully like everything hurt. They sat across from me at coffee shop in Virginia Beach, and the silence stretched until Mom broke it. We're sorry. Her voice was quiet, stripped of the defensiveness from trial. We spent 40 years enabling Jennifer while taking you for granted. We taught her that failure earned attention, and taught you that success earned silence. We were wrong, Dad added. You supported us financially for 15 years, and we never noticed because we didn't want to see it. You built $57 million while we criticized you for not sharing money you were already giving anonymously. We failed you as parents. We understand if you don't want relationship with us anymore. I studied their faces, saw genuine remorse mixed with exhaustion. They'd spent 6 months watching their elder daughter go to prison while understanding they'd help create the person who tried to commit murder. I don't know if I can trust you. The words came carefully. For 30 years, you chose Jennifer's comfort over my safety. You asked me to be the bigger person while she got to stay exactly who she was. I don't know if that pattern can change, or if you'll just wait until she's released and start the cycle again. We're in therapy. Mom's admission carried weight, individual and couples counseling, learning about enabling, about boundaries, about how parental favoritism damages everyone. We can't undo 40 years in 6 months, but we're trying to understand how we got here, so we don't repeat it. What do you want from me? Dad's answer was immediate. We want you in our lives, not as ATM, not as problem solver, just as our daughter. We want to know who you actually are instead of who we assumed you were. We want to earn trust we never should have lost. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. We agreed to monthly coffee, boundaries explicitly stated, expectations realistic. This wasn't forgiveness as much as willingness to see if relationship could be rebuilt on foundation of honesty instead of assumption. I left feeling cautiously hopeful. They'd acknowledged pattern. They'd sought help. They'd shown accountability Jennifer had never managed. Maybe that was enough to build on. Maybe not. Time would reveal it. James proposed on New Year's Eve, standing on our balcony while fireworks exploded over ocean. No big production, no elaborate plan. Just quiet question from man who'd stood beside me through trial, sentencing, family reconstruction. I love you exactly as you are. His voice carried over distant explosions. Not despite your wealth or your boundaries or your history. Because of all of it. Because you built yourself into someone who refused to be diminished, and that's the kind of person I want to build life with. Will you marry me? The answer was easiest yes of my life. We married in March on the beach behind our condo. Small ceremony, 50 guests. No family drama because Jennifer was incarcerated, and parents understood this day wasn't about them. Emma and Marcus attended, bringing their partners and their gratitude. Admiral Richardson officiated. Rebecca stood as my witness. Perfect, not because it was elaborate, but because it was exactly who we were, private, authentic, chosen. The foundation grew. By year 2, we'd granted $3.7 million to 98 women veterans. Employment rate among participants was 92%. Business success rate was 78%. Numbers that meant lives changed, wealth created, cycles broken. Jennifer's crime had been transformed into catalyst for women learning what I'd spent 30 years hiding. Financial independence is possible through discipline and patience, and asking for help is not the same as demanding rescue. Jennifer wrote from prison 18 months into her sentence. 4-page letter that started with apology and ended with request for financial support for commissary and phone calls. The middle pages were justification dressed as explanation. Mental illness, family pressure, sense of inadequacy that had driven her to desperation. I read it twice, showed it to James, to Emma, to my therapist. They all said the same thing in different words. Jennifer was still Jennifer. Sorry for consequences, but not for choices. Asking for help while framing it as I owed her something for family ties. I wrote back once, 3 sentences. I forgive you for trying to kill me. I will not support you financially. Use this time to develop accountability. She wrote again 3 months later. Longer this time, angrier. Accusations that I was cruel, heartless, enjoying her suffering. That family meant sacrifice, and I'd chosen money over blood. That she'd be homeless when released if I didn't help her rebuild. I didn't respond. Silence wasn't cruelty. It was boundary. She had 12 years before eligibility for parole. 12 years to develop skills and perspective she'd avoided for 62. Whether she used that time productively or spent it blaming me was her choice, not my responsibility. The third letter came 2 years in. Different tone this time, still asking for money, but wrapped in acknowledgement that she'd been wrong. She'd harmed me. She'd stolen from family. She'd let jealousy drive her to attempted murder. But she was working on herself, seeing therapists, taking classes. She needed help to make restitution when released, to rebuild life she'd destroyed. I filed that letter with the others. Unopened, unanswered. Maybe she was genuine. Maybe therapy was working. But changed behavior proved itself through action, not words on paper from someone who'd always been gifted at words. Emma asked once if I'd ever reconcile with her mother. We were reviewing foundation applications, sitting in the office I'd established in downtown Norfolk. The question came out carefully, like she was testing whether the answer would hurt. I don't know. The honesty felt important. Your mother tried to kill me. That's not something you move past easily. But if she ever demonstrates genuine accountability, not just words but actions, sustained over time, maybe. I'm not committed to permanent estrangement. I'm just committed to not being murdered. Emma smiled despite the darkness of the statement. That's fair. She paused, then added, You know what I learned from all this? That love doesn't mean accepting harm. That you can honor someone's humanity while refusing their dysfunction. That being family doesn't obligate you to be victim. You learned what your mother never did. That's the difference between you. 5 years after the trial, I stood on the same courthouse steps where I'd announced Jennifer's conviction. This time, the media presence was smaller, the energy different. I was there for foundation announcement, partnership with Department of Veterans Affairs, expanding services nationwide, $20 million commitment over 5 years. The reporter who'd covered the original trial asked the inevitable question, Commander Morrison, your sister is eligible for parole in 7 years. Have you thought about what happens if she's released? I've thought about it. My answer came easily because I'd been preparing it for 5 years. If Jennifer is released and demonstrates sustained accountability, I'll consider limited relationship. Supervised initially, boundaries explicit. But I won't fund her lifestyle. I won't enable her patterns. I won't set myself on fire to keep her warm. She spent 7 years in prison. If she's used that time to develop genuine accountability, we'll find path forward. If she spent it blaming everyone else for her choices, she'll do it without my participation. And if she tries to contact you, I have restraining order that extends 3 years beyond her release. She can't contact me, my husband, or my foundation. If she wants reconciliation, she'll need to earn it through demonstrated change over years, not words on paper or promises made under pressure. I learned at 58 what I should have learned at 18. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival. The cameras captured that statement, and it went viral in ways I hadn't anticipated. Women my age sharing their own stories of family members who demanded sacrifice while offering nothing. Younger women talking about breaking cycles of enabling. Veterans discussing how to build wealth without apology. The conversation had expanded beyond my particular family dysfunction into something universal. How do you honor connections without accepting harm? I didn't have complete answer, just the one I'd lived. You set boundaries, you document, you build life on your own terms, and you let consequences land where they belong. You don't rescue people from results of their choices. You don't enable by calling it love. You don't shrink to make others feel adequate. 10 years after Jennifer poisoned herself with pills meant for me, I stood on our balcony watching ships move through harbor. James was inside making dinner. Emma was bringing her new baby to visit tomorrow. Marcus was flying in from Seattle for foundation board meeting. My parents and I had coffee quarterly. Relationship rebuilt slowly on foundation of honesty. Jennifer had been granted parole 9 months ago after serving 12 years. She'd moved to Montana to live with friend from prison. We hadn't spoken. She'd sent one letter through her parole officer, asking if I'd fund her bakery idea. I'd responded through my attorney, no. The restraining order had expired. She could contact me now if she chose. So far she hadn't. Maybe she'd learned. Maybe she was just waiting for better opportunity. Either way, my life didn't revolve around managing her anymore. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then something, curiosity, completion, the sense that some conversations were inevitable, made me pick up. Kate? Jennifer's voice after 10 years sounded smaller, uncertain. It's Jennifer. I know I'm not supposed to call, but I wanted you to know I got a job. Bakery in Missoula. They hired me despite the record. I'm working register, learning business from ground up. No shortcuts this time. I'm glad you found work. Silence stretched. Then she continued. I spent 12 years in prison thinking about what I did. Not just trying to kill you, but the 40 years before that. All the times I sabotaged you, lied about you, tried to make myself look better by making you look worse. I was wrong about all of it. You didn't owe me anything. You gave me everything anyway, and I tried to kill you for it. What do you want from me, Jennifer? Nothing. Her voice broke slightly. I'm not asking for money or help or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand. You weren't the enemy. I was. And it took losing everything, my freedom, my kids, 12 years of my life, to see it. So I'm calling to say I'm sorry, really sorry. Not because I want something, but because you deserve to hear it. You deserved to hear it 30 years ago. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of decades pressing against vocal cords. This was the apology I'd waited for since I was 17 and found pills planted in my room. The acknowledgement I'd needed when she'd testified in my divorce, when she'd stolen from our parents, when she'd dissolved pills in my champagne. It came 12 years late, delivered from Montana after prison and parole and consequences I'd refused to protect her from. Thank you for saying that. The words came carefully. I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again. Too much has happened. Too much trust was broken. But I appreciate hearing you take responsibility without asking for anything in return. That's growth. And growth matters. I know I can't fix what I broke. She took a shaky breath. But I want you to know I'm trying to be different. Not for parole or for family or because I want something from you. Because spending 12 years in prison thinking about who I was made me understand I don't want to be that person anymore. Then don't be. You have the rest of your life to demonstrate that. Actions over time are what prove change, not words on a phone call. I know. Another pause. Kate, I'm proud of you. For the foundation, for building the life you wanted, for not letting me destroy you even though I tried. You deserved better than what I gave you. I hope someday you believe I mean that. Someday maybe I will. We hung up. I stood on the balcony watching ships navigate harbor channels, lights reflecting off water that had witnessed thousands of journeys. Jennifer's call didn't change anything fundamental. Apology didn't erase attempted murder. Growth didn't undo 40 years of sabotage. But it was something. Acknowledgement, accountability, the beginning of change that might sustain if she kept choosing it. James found me there 20 minutes later, brought me wine, asked if I was okay without making me explain. Jennifer called. The words came quietly, apologized, said she understands now what she couldn't understand before, that I wasn't her enemy, that she destroyed herself trying to destroy me. Do you believe her? I believe she wants to be different. Whether she can maintain that when it's hard, when there's no external pressure forcing accountability, that remains to be seen. Are you glad she called? I don't know yet. Ask me in 5 years after I see whether the apology translates to sustained change. We stood together watching ships navigate complexity of harbor traffic. Some made it through successfully. Some ran aground despite having maps. The difference wasn't luck. It was navigation skill developed through experience and maintained through discipline. I'd spent 68 years learning to navigate family dynamics that wanted me smaller than I was. Jennifer had spent 72 years navigating by blame and resentment. Maybe prison had taught her a different route. Maybe not. Either way, I'd survive. I'd built portfolio worth $64 million now. I'd established foundation that had helped 400 women veterans build financial independence. I'd married partner who loved me without needing me diminished. I'd maintained relationships with Emma and Marcus, who'd chosen integrity over comfort. I'd rebuilt careful connection with parents who'd learned enabling wasn't love. I'd done all of that while surviving attempted murder from person who should have been safest. If I could survive that, I could survive anything. The phone rang again. Emma, asking if tomorrow's visit could include lunch. Marcus, confirming Friday's board meeting. Admiral Richardson, inviting me to speak at new officer orientation about building wealth through military career. Life moving forward, full of people who valued me for who I was instead of resenting me for who I'd become. This was the justice Jennifer had never understood. Not revenge, not cruelty, just the natural result of choosing growth over grievance, boundaries over enabling, truth over performance. I'd spent 30 years building empire in secret. I'd spent 10 more years living openly as exactly who I'd always been. And Jennifer, wherever she was in Montana, finally had to figure out who she was when she couldn't define herself by opposition to me. That was her journey now. Mine had been about building myself. Hers would be about finding herself. I hope she succeeded. Not for reconciliation, that might never come, but because everyone deserved chance at becoming better version of themselves. Even people who tried to poison you at retirement parties. The ships kept moving through harbor. The foundation kept helping veterans. My marriage kept growing stronger. My portfolio kept generating passive income. And somewhere in Montana, my sister was learning to bake bread instead of burning bridges. It wasn't the ending anyone would have predicted 58 years ago, when Golden Child and Easy Child started competing without knowing it. But it was the ending we'd earned through choices made, consequences accepted, and boundaries maintained. I'd spent 58 years being underestimated. I'd spent 10 years being unavoidable. Now I was just being Kate Morrison, veteran, philanthropist, wife, investor, survivor. That was enough.